The news dominating the NBA right now is our boy Jimmy B out in Miami has been suspended 7 games. Basically, the Heat told him to go home. We're going to find a trade partner
Mm.
for you. So here's how we got here. After the Heat lost to the Celtics in the first round last season, Jimmy, who was hurt, said that it would have been different. The series would have gone different if he was healthy. To which Pat Riley in his season ending press conference said, if you're not on the court, you should just shut the hell up, basically, is what he
Oh,
said. Directed that at Jimmy.
get off my
And
lawn.
the Heat passed on a chance this summer to extend Jimmy. They could have signed him to an extra 2 years, 113 million. And by all accounts, Jimmy wanted to stay in Miami. And then recently, Shams reported that Jimmy wanted out and had preferred destinations, including Golden State, Houston, and Phoenix, followed by Miami putting out a statement saying, no, we're not trading Jimmy. During this time, Jimmy was away from the team with sickness, and
Mm.
then he finally came back. And then after a game against New Orleans this week, he said that he just wants to get his joy back. And when he was asked whether he could get it back in Miami, he said no. That's when the Heat suspended him. And that's when Shams followed up with a report that Jimmy has now requested a trade and is willing to go anywhere,
Hmm.
anywhere in the NBA. So, yeah, that's where we're at, Will. Was the Jimmy Butler Miami era a success?
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? What? They went to the finals twice. They had such memorable moments. They beat pretty much everyone in the East in that time. Like they beat all the East contenders in that time. Whether that was like pretenders like Philadelphia or like real contenders like Boston. They who else did they beat? Milwaukee
Milwaukee, they
several
had a
times.
rivalry with.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, like I feel like that era like they really did a really great job. I know regular season wise, like they didn't get the results and they weren't night in, night out. But in the playoffs, man, the playoff Jimmy was a real thing. Like what even when Jimmy says, like, if I was healthy, it would have been different. Maybe it's a bit of annoying to hear, but like I totally see where he comes from because, they had stood toe to toe against the teams like the Boston Celtics. So yeah, I think honestly, Jimmy in Miami was a huge success. I think for him, it's understandable in the sense that like if you're not gonna extend me and you're not gonna want to like coalesce to my trade demands, then a man's just gonna be upset because like clearly the future is not really there for him in Miami. And we also know from Jimmy's past experience, it's not the first time Jimmy's crashed out. Like Jimmy's had several crash outs, man. We got the three alphas era. We got obviously the Minnesota, like call Rachel Nichols after taking the third stringers to beat, the rest of the team era. We got the Philadelphia era, crashing out with Brett Brown. Like this is what he does. When he's gonna leave, he's gonna crash out. So like it's up to you at that point to manage. And I feel like with Pat, like he's definitely old school. He's literally the definition of old school. He's one of the oldest executives in sports, but like obviously he's got the resume to back that up. But like you're not gonna be able to sort of play this tough guy act. Like he's trying to play the tough guy act with like LeBron. Brown was like, cool, I'll just leave. And obviously Jimmy's not prime LeBron coming off of like, two championships and four straight finals appearances. But Jimmy still has lots of clout around the league. Lots of teams can really use Jimmy. And quite frankly, there's not other like huge names, at least available on the market like Jimmy. So yeah, more than anything else, it's just kind of funny seeing him and also his agent with Bernie Lee also like going out there and flaming Shams. Like clearly, meanwhile, that like pretty much everything Shams reported was already accurate in the first place. Um, yeah, I guess this is like the most obvious thing coming for the season was that Jimmy was going to crash out because Miami didn't want to pay him.
Yeah, so he's turning 36 this September. He's got a $52
Okay.
million player option for next season, but clearly wants a long-term deal. And I think now that
Sure.
they've reached a point where, they've sent him home, they're going to try to work out a trade. I think the Heat are probably opening up their options more, but still keeping in mind that like they don't want to take back any bad contracts, like
Okay.
long-term contracts. Like I don't know like what other teams might make sense. I've seen Memphis get mentioned a
Memphis
little
has
bit.
been really hot recently. Yeah, I
Yeah,
feel
Memphis has
apparently
been
the
a
odds
team.
shifted towards Memphis. Yeah.
Yeah, I still think like a
Eh,
Houston or Golden State does make sense.
sure.
I tried to do a deal to send Jimmy to Cleveland, but it just
Ooh.
involves them throwing in like all of their role players.
Oh, word.
So I
It's like
don't think
Max Struess 2.0. You ready
yeah,
to
I
Max
don't think
Struess again?
Miami's looking for a reunion with Max Strus while also adding George's Niang.
Oh, don't forget about Dean Wade.
Yeah,
If
Dean
Jesus
Wade is
paying LeBron,
Dean,
I'm literally paying Dean Wade
Dean
now.
Wade is also in the trade. I tried to get Jimmy back to Philadelphia. I mean,
Oh, yo, you're so messy with that, man.
no, yeah, this is the shouts to Bill Simmons, the Trade Machine Picasso.
Mm,
No, but like Obviously, the Paul George would make sense money-wise, but there's no way Miami's taking
Well,
on Paul George's contract.
like they said, they're not taking on bad
Um,
contracts.
I do like, you could trade Jimmy for Joel Embiid straight up challenge trade.
Oh yeah, what?
Daryl Morey is sick of Embiid, like, too many injuries.
Yeah, that's
It's just hard to find,
it
like,
is.
especially with Jimmy's, like, salary number. It's really hard to find deals that make sense
It
because you
is
have
really
to
hard to find
aggregate
deals.
so many players, and some of those contracts are
Yeah.
inevitably just long-term deals that
Well,
Miami's not gonna want back.
that's why a mid-tier team like Memphis, and I would say mid-tier, not in the sense of the record, because obviously the Memphis has been pretty successful this season. But a team that's not a desirable market like Memphis, like this is a good chance for them to hop in and get some talent. Memphis has a lot of like tradable salaries, sort of in that sort of range where you can sort of piece together to get a guy like Jimmy. They're not that appealing, but at the same time, Jimmy's clearly like you have to sell him by the trade deadline because he's clearly not going to stick with the situation long term, and he's going to create so much issues for you that you're literally willing to suspend him. You're saying like I'd rather Jimmy not play for me than cause more problems on the court. Like he was on the court taking one-legged threes. You know what I mean? We've seen several games this season, even against the Raptors. There were games where like, oh, Jimmy only took 7 shots. That's weird. It's like, yeah, he's openly quitting. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just think for Jimmy, like Memphis, actually, I do like that as a scenario. But I think that at that point, Jimmy actually has to be like completely honest about I can go anywhere. You know what I mean? Like if because originally there was a list of like teams that you prefer to go to. Like I think Dallas maybe was on that list,
Yeah,
and
Dallas was
Phoenix.
on it, Golden State, Phoenix, and Houston, basically.
Yeah. Which is like, okay, those are like pretty relatively ideal situations. Like we've seen free agents go there in the past. Memphis is not one of those type of teams.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if Jimmy wants out that badly, I actually like that fit quite a bit from them. Because like what they've needed is sort of that like big wing defender, basically like a Dylan Brooks, but like a good version of Dylan Brooks. Even they would even take Houston Rockets Dylan Brooks back in Memphis, I feel like. But yeah, I feel like Jimmy could really add to that Memphis team.
Denver is another option too, if the Heat were interested in the great Michael Porter Jr. Yeah. It's just
I mean, I guess.
fun.
Is Denver going to shoot less threes? I mean, it's not like Jimmy's not an upgrade over MPJ, but like
Yeah.
that whole team just doesn't shoot threes. Okay,
It's
cool.
just gonna be Jimmy and Westbrook barking at each other while Jokic throws behind the back passes to Julian Strother.
You know, I do kind of need to see Russ and Jimmy. I feel like that's a combination that would be a really good combination that has not yet been tried.
Well, I think like lost in all of this, like you mentioned though, is like, Jimmy's like 27-5-5 in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, and he has been that even up to this point in his career, like in his later age. So it's like you're not just adding, like you're potentially adding a guy that can really swing a lot of things.
For
Like,
sure.
in wherever you go. So like
Especially Memphis. Every time we see Memphis in the playoffs, Memphis has great regular season. When they get to the playoffs, they start playing like idiots.
they get really shook. So I think Jimmy, you could sell me Jimmy on any team. Like Jimmy is going to upgrade literally any team.
Where would you like to see them as a general, obviously as a Raptor fan, but a general NBA fan? Like, where would you ideally like to see Jimmy for the league?
I would love to see him on one of these Western Conference teams, whether it's a Memphis or a Denver. I think it would really shake up the Western Conference because, like right now, you've got OKC as the favorite, and then you've got these bunch of other teams that are competing. I think, if one of those teams lands Jimmy, I think they're right up there.
Yo, the West is like the NBA's Royal Rumble, bro. There's always just a random star that starts jumping into the arena. You know what I mean?
Or can we get Jimmy to the Clippers?
I like that too.
I think ultimately what went wrong with this is like they came off that finals appearance in 23. They lost to Denver, like had that magical run as the 8th seed.
Yeah.
And then the assumption was the whole summer that they were going to trade for Dame. Like Dame was on his way to Miami, and this was their way of like re-upping.
Right.
Like we're going to supercharge our offense. We have this core group. And when that didn't happen, I think it just left Miami with no other options. And now all these teams have passed them by.
This is why I don't necessarily blame Jimmy for wanting out. Maybe obviously he's been pretty demonstrative in how he wants out, but I totally understand the frustration. But like this is why I don't blame Jimmy, because it's like the Heat front office, like, okay, every year the Heat punch above their weight. Why can't the Heat just be what their weight's supposed to be, which is supposed to be a marquee franchise in like who's won multiple championships with a coach that everyone loves, everyone wants to play for, in a city that is like literally Miami. Like freaking Lionel Messi chose to go to play in Miami when he could play anywhere in the world. Okay. You're in Miami. It's like no low taxes, whatever. Like you're in the most ideal spot. So why are your free agent signings like, no offense, but like washed Kyle Lowry? You know what I mean? Or like, and that's been one of the better moves is signing for Kyle. It truly has been one of the better moves. But like, look at the roster. Like that roster should be a lot better based on sort of like just the inherent advantages that Miami has. And it's always like, oh, Jimmy, I need you to go out there and cook with Gabe Vincent. Oh, Jimmy, I need you to go out there and cook with like, Duncan Robinson. Oh, Jimmy, Haywood Highsmith, man. Caleb Martin. Like, bro, it feels like Jimmy and Spo have had to work miracles based on the fact that they don't actually get real star talent to join them. And I think that's where the front office has really missed this window, where Jimmy's been super competitive and dragging whoever along with him. And like, yes, Miami does a great job of developing talent, but that should be your secondary thing. The other thing that you should do is also get in premier talent like Jimmy Butler in the first place. Because since Jimmy signed with them, there hasn't been other stars that's joined them. And I know they've tried for Dame, whatever. I feels like Portland was like a little like, salty about how it all went down. They traded him elsewhere. But it's like, dude, that's part of the negotiation. Your goal in negotiations is to get to the point where they say yes. And Pat Riley, well, no matter what, maybe it was the tactics, maybe it was too transparent, he couldn't get Portland to say yes. And you don't get a second star in your roster, and this is what else, you run out of time, And I feel bad for the Heat only in the sense that like they had something really good and now they're going to lose it all.
Yeah, and if anything, like I feel like if you're gonna obviously go ahead and trade Jimmy, like I don't think Pat Riley will do this, but the rest of the roster is not that inspiring. Like they should go ahead and
No.
like trade Bam and trade Tyler Hero.
Well,
And
Bam's
just
also
like
having a terrible year relative to what Bam should be.
they should just start over, but I don't think they'll ever do it.
Nah.
So Wong Stradamus thinks that they're going to be the team that picks up Zion Williamson at some
Ooh,
point. Because
no,
because
not the real one.
no, because Pat Riley is always about getting that next star, and I don't really know what that next star is out there right now
Sure.
for Miami. So they're gonna have to take someone who needs to be rehabilitated a little bit,
Okay, but
and I think it's gonna be Zion.
I agree with this. I totally think that some team is definitely going to make a huge swing on Zion, and it's totally understandable because he's amazing talent. But I would just say, based on what we know about Zion off the court, is Miami the best place for him to
Well,
be?
he's going to be living with Pat Riley and Alonzo Mourning.
That's like saying you got to go to rehab, but you're sending him to like